Hello everybody, Ron Wildman in for former Macon Mayor C. Jack Ellis on Middle Georgia Spotlight. And we're doing a follow-up interview, backed by popular demand, former House Majority Leader, Larry Walker. And Larry's also, I want to mention these books that he's written. He's an author. You've been writing in the newspaper for a lot too, many years.
Let me tell you about that. I came out of church one day and the editor and publisher of the House and Home Journal, Danny Evans, was standing there, and I told Danny, I said, Danny, I've always thought I might like to write an article for the paper. He said, send me one. Never said how long, what about. And 13 and a half years later, I quit sending him one every week, and then I started writing for the Macon paper, and I wrote on Sunday on the editorial page every Sunday for 3 years there. And I enjoyed it. During the time I was doing that, I wrote a book called Life on the Gnat Line. Now that was a self-published book. My daughter, the cover, she designed the cover, and it was popular.
It's a thick one too.
Yeah, thick. And then the good people at Mercer, I talked to them, and they wanted to publish a book that I had written, and they wanted to use that gnat line again. They thought it had some appeal to it. I didn't particularly want to use gnat line again, but we ended up calling it Tales from Georgia's Gnat Line. That's just out this year, and it's been popular. It sold a lot of copies. I'm going to Athens this Friday at a book signing at Avid Books in Athens, and then I got 2 or 3 more lined up, and I've enjoyed doing that. I enjoy meeting the people, and I think it's a pretty good book, Tales from Georgia's Gnat Line. It's got some fiction in it. It's got 2 fiction pieces. One of them is a Confederate monument. It's about a Soule County commissioner. We have 6 or 7 of those in Georgia, Soule County commissioners as opposed to a board. It's got to make a decision as to whether or not to move the Confederate monument. It's got a surprise ending. The other one is Po' Boy and Bubba. Po' Boy and Bubba work in the feed store. It's about Po' Boy and Bubba, and it too has a surprise ending to it, I think. I've got the speech I made on the changing of the flag on the floor of the House. It's never been published before, although it was widely lauded when I did it. So that's in there. I've got the speech I made when I left the General Assembly after 32 years. And if you had asked me 3 years ago, what did you do? I'd have said, well, I made a real short speech and said goodbye and thanked people. That's not what I did. I made a long speech and thanked a lot of people by name and talked about a lot of things that happened when I was in the Georgia General Assembly. So I think you'd enjoy it if you love Middle Georgia and you love, I know you don't love gnats. If you love gnats, there's something wrong with you, but we have them, we have to live with them. And thus, it Tales from Georgia's Gnat Line. The gnat line being the fall line. It runs basically from Columbus through Macon to Augusta. It's on that line and south of that line that we have gnats. And if you live where gnats are, you know about gnats. I say that if gnats were in Atlanta and Washington, D.C., they'd get rid of them. I wish they'd move up there, but they're not. They're not going to move up there, so we're going to have to continue to cope with them.
Where do we find these books?
You can find that one, both of them online. Now, that book's out of publication, but you can get a used copy, and you can go on Amazon. Gottwald's Books in Houston County.
I was going to mention Gottwald. I know has a few of them down there.
And he's a good guy, and he's got a good bookstore, and you can probably get them cheaper. You can get them cheaper from Gottwald's Books than you can me, I'll tell you that. So that's a good place to get them also.
Also, they can get them from you, because I've purchased the book from you.
Yes, you can get them directly from me. I'll inscribe them. If you want them mailed, the purchase price would include mailing them. It costs $3.27 to mail one of those books, and I pay the sales tax. So I charge $30, but for that you can get it mailed, and then I'll pay the sales tax.
And how do we get a copy from you?
Well, my mailing address is P.O. Box 1234, Perry 31069. You can drop me a note. You can call me, you can email me, and I'll get it to you. Send them all over the country.
You mentioned the controversy over the Georgia flag. Let's talk about that for a while.
Well, I think it's one of the, it's interesting that symbols are so important. If you ask me some of the bigger things we did, they would involve symbols. Changing the flag being one of them, adopting Georgia on My Mind as our state song. I'm a son of the South. You can listen to me talk and tell I'm a son of the South. And I spoke on that bill. I was the last one to speak. The governor asked me to speak last, and I did. And I said this in my speech. I said, I'm a son of the South. I said, when I watched that movie Gettysburg and those boys in gray try to take the Cemetery Ridge in Gettysburg,
yeah.
I want them to take it. I can't help it. It's just in me. But it was time to change the flag. It was a big economic thing when we did that, and I think it's been helpful to Georgia. And frankly, we ended up with a mighty pretty flag, I think.
I remember one of the flags that we flew for a while was a blue flag, and it had copies of all those other flags along the border of it, I believe. How did that come about?
Well, that was Governor Barnes was involved in changing the flag, and I commend him for that. I thought it was a gutsy move, just to be honest with you, and it probably helped defeat him when he ran for re-election. But that was a flag that somebody proposed to him for the Georgia flag, and he liked it and bought into it, and that was the initial, after the flag was changed, that's the flag we had. And then when Sonny Perdue got elected, they changed it even more, and we have a mighty pretty flag, I think. I commend Barnes for doing what he did. I frankly, even though I was part of that, I probably like the present flag better.
The relationship with Sonny Perdue over the years. I remember when Sonny first ran for the Senate, and it was, I don't know what they call the day when they sign in and say they're going to run or something.
Right.
I remember you buttonholed me and said, Sonny Perdue is running for the Senate over there. So I scooted over, not a soul around, except me and my camera. I still see that signature pitting, and the history since then involving Sonny Perdue has been amazing.
Yeah, comes from a good family and an old Houston County family, hardworking, decent, moral, smart people. Sonny's done some really big things, including being, I think, the biggest governor of the state of Georgia. Sonny went in as governor. It wasn't good times, or economically it was not good times. But during his 8-year tenure, times got better, and he had money to spend and did a good job with it. And he was also a good person, frankly, when you didn't have money, he knew how to say no.
Well, he grew up on a farm, didn't he?
He grew up on a farm. He knew about years when you have money and years when you don't have money.
I remember the night that President Trump, just before the inauguration, was talking about Sonny up there in Washington, said he had interviewed 11 people for Ag Commissioner, and Sonny was the only one of those 11 that had grown up on a farm.
How about that? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It shows you the way politics work up there in Washington.
Right.
They got a farmer up there now. Do you keep up with him in any way?
Larry sees him more than I do. I see his cousin, first cousin, our United States Senator.
David Perdue.
David
from
Perdue,
Houston
more
County.
than I do Sonny, and I like David, and of course like Sonny, but I don't see them too much. They're busy, I'm busy, and frankly, I don't go to as many political things as I used to go to. I've had I started to say a lifetime, about 50 years of politics and going to things, and I just don't go to as many as I used to, although if they involved in it, invite me, I'd try to go.
What was it like in Houston County when David Perdue and Sam Nunn's daughter collided for that Senate race?
Well, it was, I'm a personal example of it. I mean, I'm very fond of Sam Nunn. He's been very nice to me. He's one of my good friends. He's a client of mine. Also the Perdue family. So you're asking somebody that knows exactly it was difficult. It was difficult. And I gave both of them some money, to be honest with you.
Can we ask who got the vote? Or we
No, I'm not going to go that far.
Well, moving along with the legislature, you talked about image. Georgia on My Mind is one of the best image makers for our state ever. How did that come about? Being the state song and Ray Charles and...
Well, I think that I can't call her name right now. I'm ashamed. Representative from DeKalb County, and I'll think of it, I hope, before we get through. But she proposed it, I think. Now, a lot of people take credit for it today, that it was their idea, but I thought it was Peggy Childs. Peggy, C-H-I-L-D-S.
Yes, I do.
Peggy didn't live very long after she sponsored that bill and it passed. She had cancer. I think she had breast cancer. And but she was a sweet, nice, kind lady, and she proposed it, and we passed it, and we passed it in fine fashion. We were ready to vote on it. Peggy was part of this. Other people were part of it. And we had Ray Charles, who actually came on the floor of the House, had a piano on the floor of the House. We had a hookup. Now, this was in the 1970s. We had a hookup to Hoagie Carmichael in Los Angeles or in Hollywood, wherever he lives out there, who had written the song. And he talked to us. What I remember that he said was that it's the earliest he'd ever gotten up in his life to talk to us. But the whole legislature could hear him. And then Ray Charles, who 10 years earlier couldn't even come on the floor of the House, to a standing ovation, played and sang Georgia on My Mind, and we voted to pass it as a state song. Biggest bang for the buck we've ever probably passed did in the 10th time I was there. I mean, all over the world, Georgia on My Mind is played. I went with a person to, lobbyist actually, with Coca-Cola to Paris. And we wanted to go see where Dodie and Diane were immediately prior to the time that they were killed in an automobile accident, which was the Ritz Hotel in Paris. And we went there. And they had a beautiful a lounge, I guess is what you'd call it. I said it was the narcissistic, anorexic people there of Paris. There were some beautiful people in there in this lounge. And as we walked in the door, the piano player started playing Georgia on My Mind. I said, this is providential. I mean, here we were, two Georgia boys walking into this place in Paris, and the piano player was playing Georgia on My Mind. I tell you, it's probably the biggest bang for the buck that the state of Georgia ever got out. Symbols are important. You just asked me about two. The flag, Georgia on My Mind. Two important symbols that were passed during the time I was there. I think the most exciting thing that ever happened was during my tenure was when we passed Georgia on My Mind. I think the most electric, I mean, the air was just, you could cut it with a knife almost. People were nervous and tense. And sometime, I don't have time today, I'll tell you the whole story about what happened that day. Mr. Murphy he said we're going to recess. It was late on Friday. We're going to recess and we're going to go home and come back Monday and finish it. And I went to the podium and I said, Mr. Murphy, Mr. Speaker, that's what I call him, Mr. Speaker, don't let these people go home if you want this bill to pass. Because if you let them go home, they come back on Monday, they'll never vote to pass it. And he said, I think you're right about that. So he kept them there and we voted and it passed. It went to the Senate, they passed it. Rest is history. We ended up with a good flag we can all be proud of. And I think economically it would hurt us if we had not done what we did.
Well, in our previous program, we talked about the Atlanta airport, Hartsfield, and the port in Georgia is really instrumental in the economics of this nation.
Amazing what goes on down that port. And and it's perceptive of you to mention the airport and the port. The airport and the ship port, I'll call it. They are tremendous economic factors in this state. Georgia is one of the great states in this country. It's amazing what goes on here, and the growth in Georgia, and people wanting to come live here, and the Georgia Bulldogs, I might add. the University of Georgia and Georgia Tech. I'm a double dog. I got 2 degrees from the University of Georgia. Love the University of Georgia. Extremely proud of it. One of the outstanding public schools in this country. Wasn't that way 50 years ago. Georgia Tech, I told Bud Peterson when he was president, I said, Mr. President, I'm with you about 7 or 8 days out of the year. I'm bad against you on those days. Georgia Tech, one of the outstanding institutions in the world. It's what they do up there at Georgia Tech is absolutely amazing. I served 7 years on the Board of Regents, and I tell you, some of the things that go on at Georgia Tech are mind-boggling. All right here in Georgia, a backwater state 50 years ago.
Well, we always hear about the technology out in California, but they say Georgia Tech puts out more of those people every year than all of those places out there.
Well, it's an amazing place, and I'm proud of it. As a Georgian, I'm proud of Georgia Tech. I'm proud of the University of Georgia. And we've got other great, Mercer University. One of the most important things for Middle Georgia, Mercer University. It's amazing what's going on at Mercer University. It's amazing how they've changed Macon. It's amazing what a good job has been done by Mercer University. I've become a big fan of Mercer University. I think my association with them, with this book, has really elevated my knowledge about what goes on here. And I'm very, very proud of Mercer University. We've got outstanding president. My great friend Jim Cole's the athletics director. I talk to him often, fish with him. Really, really proud of Mercer University.
During your years on the Board of Regents, there was a lot of growth across the state.
Absolutely.
I know Middle Georgia State University here in
Middle
Macon
Georgia
and
State
Cochran.
University got a great president. Chris is an outstanding president. I can't say too much about Middle Georgia State University. I chaired the committee when we hired him, and he's very smart, very interesting to be around. If you don't know him and have an opportunity to be around him and talk to him, you'll find out what I'm talking about. He's from England. He went to Oxford, not the Oxford in Covington, Georgia, but the Oxford in England, and that's where he went to school. And just a delight to be around. And I kid him and tell him if he'd ever learned to speak English. Of course, he speaks the real English, impeccable English, but I like to tease him about he ought to learn to talk and learn how to speak English.
Some Georgia English.
From Georgia English, right.
A little side note on him, he was a history buff, and World War I interested him, and he had his crew go up and clean our monuments on Coleman Hill each November during the anniversaries for World War I. And I thought for somebody to come over here and do what we should be doing ourselves, and him doing it was very
that's
impressive.
Right, and he's wrote a book on World War I and his relatives in it. And I read it. When I started out reading it, I thought this would be a dry kind of a book written by a professor-type scholar. And the truth of the matter is it was an outstanding book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It read more like a novel. It was not a novel, it was true, but it was a very good read. I can't remember the name of it. I didn't know you were going to ask me. I would have had it, but you ought to find out about it and read it. Very good book.
You know, during the past few years, I would visit these campuses from time to time, covering the news, plus our technical schools. That's a part of the system, isn't it?
Part of the system, part of the state of Georgia system, and what a blessing they've been to so many people, and what a great job. When you graduate from one of our technical schools, you got a job waiting on you. You can't always say that about the colleges, but you can say it about the technical schools. And the cooperation between the public schools and the public high schools and the vocational school, and the cooperation between the vocational schools, or technical colleges is the correct name for it, and the colleges and universities is outstanding. It's just like the cooperation between local delegations. When you cooperate, you accomplish a lot more.
And the emphasis ever since you were a child and I was a child was college, college, college. And it seems to be changing a little bit now.
Yeah, it is changing. It's not college. Number one, college is not for everybody. Vocational school is not for everybody. There's some people that are a lot better at technical things and maybe working with your hands, and some people are better at working differently. But I can't say. My daddy was the first vocational teacher in Houston County. He started the FFA at Perry High School. He started the FFA at Lanier High too, also. So I'm a big vocational school person. Although I went to college, have 2 degrees, I believe in technical education.
There was a filmmaker in your family, wasn't there?
My granddaddy was Granddaddy Gray, Charles P. Gray. He was from Danville, Virginia, and my grandmother lived in Danville, Indiana, and he moved to Danville, Indiana. They got on a train and went to California, and he was a cameraman at Universal Studios out there. He and my grandmother left and went to Tombstone, Arizona. Pancho Villa was raiding across the border, and they could hear him shooting. Then they went back to California, and then they came to Perry. And they said the 2 worst things they could say about a person that wanted to be in politics. They said he was a Yankee. Now, he was from Danville, Virginia, but they said he was a Yankee. And they had something that preceded that, starts with a D, Yankee, and he was a Republican. That was the 2 worst things back in those days you could say. He bet on the presidential race. He bet on Hoover, and Mr. Whipple bet on Roosevelt. Well, Mr. Whipple won, and my granddaddy had to roll a peanut down the main street of Perry, Carroll Street, with his nose, and he did it. And they let the schools out, and the Associated Press covered it. It went all over the country with him down on his all fours, rolling that peanut. Now, I will say he had put an artificial nose on. Otherwise, he'd probably skin his nose up pretty badly. We got pictures, and you can see the little boys with knickers on up on the buildings watching it. Then he got elected mayor of Perry, despite the fact he was a Yankee and a Republican. And I think it's because he rolled that peanut down the main street of Perry with his nose. That's why they voted him mayor.
Was he still around when you were a youngster?
Oh, yes. He died when I was at the University of Georgia. Died in the 60s. But he was much beloved and had a huge funeral, and was a good man. Good man.
Well, tell his son, your father.
No, this is the gray side. My daddy he was from out in the country, from Worthing, Georgia, from Sandersville, Georgia. You're out in the country when you come from a place like that. And Daddy came to Perry to teach vocational agriculture, and married my mother and had 4 children. And he chaired the Houston County School Board for 22 years. Every year they re-elected him. The whole time he was on there, and he and David Perdue, David Perdue's father, handled all the integration when they integrated the schools, and I think they did a mighty good job with it. And Senator David Perdue thinks they did too, because he just about every time I'm in the audience and he's speaking, he brings that up and talks about it.
I remember Superintendent Perdue. It was one of my first interviews when I came to Georgia. Man of a very few words, at least he was with me.
Yeah.
And it's something.
Good school superintendent, though. Good school.
Oh, yes, indeed. And then David's up there in Washington now with a lot of controversy going on up there. How do you see things up there now?
That's over my load, Ron. I mean, I don't know. We live in a complicated world. The more things we get to try to make things simpler and easier, the more complex it gets. And I don't know where it's all going. We're in a complicated world. There's always been change, and people always fuss about change, but change used to take place over decades. You could look back 25 or 30 years and there'd been a little change. Now you look back 2 or 3 years and there's been a lot of change, and I think it'll get faster. I don't know where it's going. I mean, you think about how many things you see on TV that happen that are filmed. There's a video of it, It's on TV almost immediately. Where are all these cameras? I mean, it's almost like the cameras everywhere taking pictures of everybody. And I don't know where it's going to go. It kind of alarms me.
Like this.
Yeah.
Everybody is a TV studio now.
Right.
Or potential of
Exactly.
being a TV studio. And the way the news is delivered these days, the 24 news cycle, there's never, I mean, I can be up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and if they forgot to put something on, they'll jam it in there, and you know about it at that time. It never stops.
Never stop.
And it's on local news. Every day I would wake up, I had an empty page in front of me. I had to fill that newscast every day. Well, they got to do it around the clock now.
I tell you what, I get up 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning and do a lot of reading, but I turn the TV on, and I believe if you turn it to Fox News at that time of day, you could win a lot of money by, you know, the line that goes under there with the writing on it. You could bet people that Trump's name will be in it, and I believe that 75, 80% of the time, the first thing you see is a line on there with Trump's name in it. I don't know how you live with that much publicity.
Do we ever turn back, you think, in the future, or is that the future?
I don't think we're going to turn back. I mean, unless something catastrophic happens, and I hope it doesn't happen. I'm not wanting something catastrophic to happen, but I don't believe it's going to turn back. I think it's going to get more complicated, faster. I don't see it turning back.
What do you see about the future of the state, Georgia?
I think the future of Georgia is good. I think it's very good. Best place in the country to do business, they say. I believe it. I think it's the best place. Now, it's not the best for all of Georgia, and you've got Georgia largely, although not completely, but below the net line. A lot of Georgia below the net line is suffering. Small towns. I'm considering writing an article for James Magazine. I'm going to call it Small Towns Lives Matter Too.
I remember during that era you were up there, we put a lot of these prisons in different parts of the state to help the economics.
Right.
And they're still doing well down there, but they need more of that.
And there's some of them that are on life support. If you don't have a good public school, though, you've got a hard road to hoe to have a good economy. That's number one, in my opinion, a good public school. You're not going to get people to put industry in a community that doesn't have a good public school. And I think that's just a fact of life, and we're working on that, and we're making some progress. Health care is important, but you can get in your car and drive 30 or 40 miles to get health care. If you don't have a good public school for your children to go to, most of the people can't afford private schools, and public schools is where you got the mass of the people have got to be educated, and if you don't have good public schools, you got a rough road to hoe.
On that note, Larry, we thank you for doing a two-parter for us the
it
last couple of weeks.
very
And
much.
keep in mind Larry's books, they're available out there, Tales of the Georgia Gnat Line and Life on the Gnat Line.
Right.
Not Gnat Line, is it? Larry, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Ron Wildman in here for former Macon Mayor Jack Ellis on Spotlight in Middle Georgia.